Chapter 19, Section 2 talks about the population growth rate, which is the number by which a population size is going to change over time. And that's going to depend on four main factors: birth and death rates, and then immigration and immigration. And immigration means moving out of the population, immigration means moving into the population. Some calculations that go into figuring out the population growth rate. Things that add to the population are births and immigration. Things that subtract would be deaths and emigration. Now for our purposes, we're going to assume that immigration and emigration are going to be approximately equal. That just simplifies our calculation a little bit for us. So we're going to take the birth rate minus the death rate, and that will give us the growth rate for our area. There's two different models of growth that you'll need to know the difference between, and that's exponential model, or this J-shaped curve, and the logistic model, which has this S-shaped curve to it. So for the exponential model, the larger the population gets, the faster it's going to be able to continue to grow. So the more people means that there's more possibility for babies. The birth and death rates are about constant again, and the limitation here is that this only will exist under rare conditions and for short periods of time. So for instance, you could grow bacteria in a lab and exhibit exponential growth as long as you were going to provide it with enough food and enough space to continue to grow. But in real life, there are different conditions called limiting factors that are going to restrict how much that population can grow. So when resources become scarce or waste starts to accumulate too quickly, then the population will be affected by that. And that's where the logistic model comes into play, or that S-shaped curve. So it's essentially the exponential model just accounting for those limiting factors. So we're going to see in this graph here, this little line, this is the K value, or carrying capacity. This is the number of individuals the environment can support for a period of time. So the population will grow and grow and grow, and then eventually when it's reaching that carrying capacity, it'll start to level out. It won't be able to grow any faster because there won't be enough resources to be able to support those organisms. And this can fluctuate slightly, a little higher, a little lower, but it generally stays about the same for an environment pretty consistently. Some other ways populations can be regulated are density-independent limiting factors and density-dependent limiting factors. A density-independent factor means that the reduction of the population is going to be by the same proportion no matter what the size is. So these would be things like weather conditions, natural disasters. A fire or a flood comes through an area and it's going to wipe everything out in its way. It doesn't matter whether there's a lot of organisms living there or only a few. So that's density independent. Density dependent limiting factors are going to be affected by the population size. So the larger the population means that the larger the proportion of reduction will be. So these would be things like resource limitations, not having enough food or habitat space. And then populations have the ability to fluctuate in size. Some are linked to environmental conditions. One of the most common ones you'll see a lot on standardized tests are graphs of lynx and hare cycles. So lynx are predators to the hare, and perhaps maybe it would be a drought and the hare would not be able to get as much grass to eat, so their population would decrease, and then that in turn would cause their predators to decrease because they wouldn't be providing them with as much food. But then as the predator numbers decrease, perhaps the prey would be able to increase in size because not as many of them would be getting eaten, and then their population could begin to rise again. So depending on what's going on in the environment, these population sizes have the ability to fluctuate or make changes. Some populations that really have to be careful are the small ones. They are very vulnerable to extinction. It could be from an environmental disturbance. Again, a fire, storm, a disease comes through the population, and they might not have the numbers to be able to fight it off. There's also a higher likelihood of inbreeding or mating with relatives, which can result in fewer offspring being born, and then also decreased genetic variation, which, as we know from our genetics unit, can increase genetic disorders. So maybe not having as healthy of offspring as well. So that can be an issue with very small populations.